So we have a few minutes now for questions to the panel. So just to reassure everyone that's been posting questions, if we don't come to them today, we'll seek to provide a follow-up from today where we can answer some of those questions, and we'll also share some of the very helpful links that you've been given to other sources of material. So what I want to start with actually is this issue of communication, because it's come up a lot. Rocio, you talked about it, Rachel, you did, and it's something that's come up to me a lot from older people, that the messaging isn't straightforward, that sometimes the messaging seems quite confused. If you're not online, it can be difficult to find out what's going. And one of the questions was also about if you're suffering from cognitive impairment, how can you make sure that the messages are getting to you? So I'd really like to get some suggestions of answers and ways forward on this. So I'm going to come to Rocio first on this one, particularly for BAME elders. How can we make sure that the communications are improved?
Thank you, Helena. I think it relates to the point that Rachel was just making about the need to work with groups which are engaged with diverse and BAME older people. There has to be a stronger kind of two-way communication. There needs to be resourcing put in place to make that happen from mainstream organisations, particularly, and also some resourcing to community groups on the ground. This engagement and this conversation can't just happen, you know, in an ad hoc way, or, you know, once a year or once a month. It needs to be integrated and planned and just become part of business as usual. Ideally, the workforce of charities and organisations supporting older people would become more diverse itself, with more languages within the team, so that it's not always about, you know, reaching out and trying to find so-called hard to reach, and it's about integrating for the long term, making making the them part of us. You know, it's a long-term goal. I think short-term, it's about putting resources in place to make that communication happen.
But as you put it very well, though, it's about building it so it becomes the way in which we work, and that we as organisations, we become more diverse and our communications become more diverse. Rachel, can I come back to you on this point about communication as well? One of the things that's been said to me is it'd be really helpful if some of the sort of communications from the Welsh Government were specifically sort of directed more to older people. Do you think that would be helpful if some of the television briefings, for example, included a slot where the First Minister was directly talking to older people?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, just to give you some idea of what's going on as part of the Test, Trace and Protect programmes across Wales. The protect element really is about making sure that people are as up to date and as fully engaged and understand what all of the messaging means. You know, you can go onto the .gov website and you can see one set of information. You might go onto the Public Health Wales website and you might see something else. And then locally, there will be messages that relate specifically, particularly now where you've got local restrictions, they'll relate to local restrictions. So it is a very confusing picture. And I think that it is such a fast moving situation as well. It's quite difficult to keep it all up to date and connected in the same way. But part of the Protect workstream, certainly in Cwmtaf Maganog, and if there are any colleagues on the webinar from any other TTP programmes, please feel free to put something in the chat. What we are trying to do, particularly through our third sector colleagues and working with our social care colleagues, is to take that fairly complex messaging and turn it into a what does this mean for me? So very much in the kind of what matters conversation is saying to people who call up. So if they call up through Age Connect, if they call up through Age Cymru helpline, if they get in touch through a Friend in Need programme, or any of the other services and support, the 50+ forums that exist, is that we say to them, okay, what is it that you don't, what is it you need help with? And we can try and work through based on their situation, because everybody's situation is different. So the guidance that I need and the information I might need might relate to something very specific. Can I spend time with my friends and family? Can I, but that does require a fairly significant mobilization of an already very, very, very busy and overstretched third sector and community group.
Yeah, and I know you and other charities and Age and others are doing a huge amount in terms of that information and advice, but we also know that charities have been struggling during this time, particularly because some of the ways in which you can fundraise, like events and things, haven't been able to happen. So at a time of greater demand, it's also been quite challenging. I want to come on now to a point that a number of you have raised around community centres and how these can be opened up again and how our communities can be more age friendly. I'd like to come back to Hugh initially on this, if I may. How can we get to a place where some of those community centres can be open safely again, and we can think about how we can really enable people to connect and as you were saying, Hugh, build on age-friendly developments?
So originally the community centres were closed obviously on the basis of Welsh Government guidance. They have been reopened in lots of parts of Wales, and certainly Cefn Cribble Community Centre has reopened. I'm proud to voluntary chair the community association that's run that for 20 years. So you can come along for Pilates at the Cefn Cribble Community Centre if you like. The key aspect is that those community centres need to be managed very safely. Needs to be a proper risk assessment in place. Of course, the situation is evolving very quickly with the local restrictions. And I was just checking actually, because I saw the question. I think we need to make sure that the Welsh Government frequently asks questions for areas in and the local restrictions. That those frequently asked questions are updated to reflect the questions around community centres. But it's a very good question, because they are a vital part of the community infrastructure, particularly for older people.
Thank you, Hugh. And the other question that's come up quite a bit is about access to health services. We haven't talked about that much yet today, but I've certainly had a lot of feedback from older people who are struggling to get to see their GPs and struggling to access health services. So I don't know if any of the panel want to come on to this point about accessing health services and how that can be improved at the moment. Does anyone want to come in on that? Tom?
I'm happy to. Yeah, I think as a sort of general point around, I mean, I very, very much heard kind of what Margaret was saying, some of the challenges she'd had around accessing podiatry. I know some of the kind of discussions in the chat around kind of contacting GPs and getting appointments, and it can raise, can increase a lot of anxiety if you can't access kind of various types of health and social care when you need it. I think there's the kind of general point I would make is around using, if we are going to use the kind of COVID crisis for good, is around how can we fundamentally rethink some of the way that we've been providing some of these services. I think pragmatically we recognise that some types of services will never be able to catch up. So actually reverting back to how we were delivering them in January is unacceptable. So we do need to think about redesigning and rethinking how we provide certain health and social care services, particularly across the kind of health and social care continuum. So I think there is clearly a technological aspect to some of this. So actually, with the accessibility of GP appointments, I'm not saying that's the only way, but I think that's a way of making sure that people are able to access them in a much more timely fashion. And I suppose, coupled with that, we need to ensure that all kind of demographics are able to meaningfully engage with these services. That's not just from a sort of an age perspective, that's also from making sure it's bilingual, etc. But I think this is an opportunity about how we can think about outpatient stuff. How do you access GPs? More kind of community-based services, because otherwise, I think if we have the mindset of trying to go back to normal, that's not a good position to be in. We need to use this as an opportunity to really rethink how we can provide this. And I think that where we have that co-construction kind of engagement piece to make sure that older people and a range of different kind of demographics are meaningfully engaged in the actual design of these future services, rather than it being sort of done to them. It needs to be done with them.
Thank you, Tom. And I'm aware that we're almost coming to the end of time, but I'm just going to ask Rachel to come in very quickly, if you may.
Yeah, just very quickly, and on the subject of podiatry, I think that there's an Age Connect or an Age Cymru toenail cutting service in almost every local authority area in Wales, and they will be connected to their NHS podiatry teams to make sure that we are all trying to deliver support to those people that need it. Admittedly, we are not chiropodists or podiatrists, so this is basic toenail cutting, but I would urge anybody that is, if they're concerned about somebody who is struggling to walk as a result of overgrown toenails in the last 6 months, and I suspect that there are many, please do check out your local Age Cymru or local Age Connect toenail cutting service. I'm sure they'll be able to help.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and we are nearly at the end of time, so well, not at the end of the whole time, as it were, but end of the time for this session. And just again, to reassure all of you that have been kindly putting things into the chat and into the questions, we will be producing a note following this meeting. So we will aim to reflect everything that you've been raising, and also do stay in touch with us. So if there's anything subsequently that you feel you'd really like to raise with us or suggest, then let us know. I'm going to ask now the panel to do something almost impossible, which is to take no more than 30 seconds each. And I will be timing you, and I will cut you off 30 seconds each with some final thoughts. And particularly, I'd like you to focus on action. So what can we do now? What are we doing now? So I'd like us to try and leave on a sort of positive tone if we can. So I wonder, Tom, if I could come to you first, then I'll come to Rossio, then Rachel, then Hugh. So Tom first, please.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I think I'd probably link back to the comments I raised around really successful projects like Digital Communities Wales. How can we, the long-term sustainable funding to really meaningfully change behaviours, structures and cultures. So, that is around the training piece, the upskilling piece. It is about getting into recognising the local, regional challenges that people have. So actually, it isn't just a one-size-fits-all approach across all of Wales. It's recognising the specificity of challenge that would be very different in Newport than it would be in Anglesey. So I think there are loads of examples, and I would kind of point to Digital Communities Wales as a really good example of that. And there's great work from across various health boards and different parts of the health and social care system. But I think there was a fair pushback in the chat around delivering stuff at pace and at scale. I think we need to be able, we need to do that rather than talk about doing that.
Great. Okay, so that's really helpful. And a shout out to Digital Communities Wales. And this importance about making sure things are relevant to the area, because Wales is a very diverse country. Thank you. Rossio.
Thank you. I think I would ask people to really find local groups working with BAME communities. There's a list on the East website if you want to have a look. We know there are about 120, 150 community groups working with BAME people across Wales. So find those groups, make connections with them, have a two-way dialogue so that you can agree and decide what your local priorities are, come up with some solutions, and put some money into those solutions and make it happen.
Fantastic, thank you. Very practical, very good, and something everyone can do. That's wonderful. Hugh.
Yeah, thanks, Helena. I think we need to deliver digital inclusion as quickly as we can, and that's something you and I will pick up with Welsh Government. We need to get some funding in there ASAP. Just in terms of keeping in touch with older people, we rang everyone on the shielding programme. I think we've got to return to some of those traditional methods of communication, ringing people, and we wrote out to every household in Bridgend. Trouble is the rules are changing, but we've still got to return to some of those more traditional forms of contact. And then finally, I'll take back to colleagues about community centres. But just to remind everyone that most community centres are run by volunteers, and many of those volunteers are older people themselves, and I know from personal experience that they're nervous actually about opening their community centres in many cases. But that said, it's something we've got to look at. So that's been really useful to hear that feedback today.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Leila.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you very much, and look forward to taking these things forward with you. And Rachel.
Yeah, I mean, my takeaway is basically everything that's on the report as recommendations. I will be taking that back with Hugh's support. Hugh, I've roped you in now. There's no backing down. This is all public. We'll certainly be taking this back to the Regional Partnership Board in Cwmtaf and Gadael and asking ourselves and the members of that board how we are going to address these recommendations and how we can support you, Commissioner, to lobby Welsh Government and make these changes happen, because I do honestly believe that the price we will pay for not encouraging and supporting older people to regain their pre-COVID independence, I think no country could afford the cost of that. So I will make a promise now that as far as Cwmtaf Meganic is concerned, Hugh and I'm roping him again, we will make sure that your report is on the next agenda and we ask ourselves some very serious questions about how we can address your recommendations.
Rachel,
I got no choice now, have I? We'll have to do it now then. Okay, there we go.
This is being recorded and is public. This is fantastic. Thank you all very much indeed. And just to say, the actions that are in the report, my fantastic team are working on those every day. So we are making progress on those immediate actions. We're working with a number of you that have been on this webinar today, and with other stakeholders, and we will continue to do so. These are things that need to happen now and over the next weeks and months, as well as those longer term issues. So if you're interested in working with us or have anything to suggest, please don't hesitate to get in touch. This is not about one person doing something or one organisation. It's about how we can all work together in a common good. So can I thank you all very much for coming today? Can I thank all my team and my colleagues for organising it so well, and a special thank you to Margaret, to Rachel, to Rocio, to Tom and to Hugh for speaking. I've certainly drawn a huge amount from it. And the phrase that has stuck with me really is not surprisingly one of Margaret's. Margaret, you talked about people who live on their own, and you said you feel as if you're being punished for something you haven't done. And that really resonated with me in terms of how some older people have felt and this notion of being left behind. So let's go on from here. Let's make that pledge that we won't be the country that leaves people behind. We will be the nation that works together in solidarity to ensure that we can come through this. So Diolch yn fawr, thank you so much again, and please all stay safe and well, and we'll be in touch with a note following today's event. Thank you.